All right, all right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Digital Recruiter Podcast. I'm your host, Clark Wilcox, and I have a very special guest today. I'm going to learn a lot today. You're going to learn a lot today. It's going to be great. We have Diane Prince, who started her staffing agency in her house, grew it to 8 figures, sold it to a public company for $28 million. Guys, we're going to learn a lot today. She's exited and built and exited 4 more businesses. She's taught other entrepreneurs the 5-step framework to building an 8-figure recruiting business. She got her program now, Recruiting Agency 360, that's helping owners build and execute recurring revenue models so you can have predictable income, right? Kind of similar to a digital recruiter, but I don't know. I might be outshined here today. She was in Malibu for the longest time, close to my old stomping ground in Santa Monica. Now she's in Phoenix. She's got family, 3 kids, and just got a Wonder Woman, I think, in agency recruiting. Diane, thanks for being here.
Hey, Clark. How you doing?
This is good. I think it was the longest, most deserved intro I've had on this podcast. So I am excited to dig in and talk to you and learn more because I think you just have such a cool background. And a lot of people need to hear stories like this and like yours and know that it's possible to build a real agency and to have a good time and a good life and do it the right way and not just be running gun all the time. So I'm excited to learn more today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning. How did you get into recruiting?
Okay. Well, I love what you said about knowing that it's possible because this is very possible. So I got into recruiting because, and I know what your next question is going to be. So they tie in together. So I always go from like the vision first and why starting a business. So for me, it wasn't. I had no experience. I temped. I was a temp in college and grad school. That's a whole other story. But I wanted to start a business that I could sell. So like that was our goal, was to start a business that we could build and exit and retire in our 30s. So that's how it started. And then we knew we had to find a business model that could help us to achieve that. So we worked backwards from there.
Interesting. And so I got so many questions. What was the temp job? Number 1.
Oh, okay. So at the temp job that I started with?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be like super brief. In college, I used to get work permits to work abroad. And when I was 19, I found myself tapping beer at a pub in the middle of Piccadilly Circus in London. And I obviously knew nothing about tapping beer. And back then, people in Europe didn't really type. This is totally aging me. And so I was pouring a beer very badly for an English man. And he said, "How fast do you type?" Because obviously I couldn't pour beer. I couldn't tap a beer. And it turned out I was about 80 words a minute. So the next day I got a job and I temped all through London, which was fantastic because I took short-term assignments. So I got to learn all about different areas of London. And then I did, and so like all through college and grad school, like receptionist, secretary, admin assistant, that kind of thing.
I love that. I love Piccadilly Circus is great. I've been out there. My sister lives out there, and I was also actually, has done the temp, masters, temp, all that out in London. So there's a whole connection there, which is actually pretty cool.
So the glass blower.
I know what that is, but not the pub. No, I am not familiar with that. But that is hilarious. So you got the job, 80 words per minute. So you can type fast to be work with done quicker and then get someone else to actually pour you your beer. So no, you flip that around pretty good. That's awesome. That is such a cool story.
I have to tell you that on my very first assignment, because I was so clueless, I overheard the office manager say to another employee, "Remind me never to hire a temp again." It's my first assignment.
You've come a long way.
You've come a long way. My American accent.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because the name, you wouldn't know. So that's classic. That's like truly my foray into aerotech was being called about a temp job. I didn't take it,
Mhm.
but it was like that was, I got called, and that's how I learned about the industry. So, all right, you're traveling, you're spilling beer, you're typing, you do all this. Where did the inspiration come from to just like at that age to be like, we're gonna build and sell a business? Like, where'd that come from?
Yeah, it was a few years later because then I went to grad school. I taught French and
Yeah.
I went studied French, and I was married, and so we decided, I don't know, we were like getting up every day and going to these jobs, and I was working after grad school as a computer reseller, and it was just like we were like, are we just going to do this and go to jobs, and so it was kind of came from that, and like let's do something else.
I love it. I love it. So how how'd you go about it? I mean, you had been a temp. You landed on recruiting. So how'd you land on staffing and recruiting?
Well, because so we kind of put it together. So what we did, knowing what our goal was
Hmm.
to build a business that we could sell, then we just started brainstorming, and it didn't take that probably a few weeks, just like writing down, talking to everybody, like what kind of business could we start, and so my father was in title insurance, and if you don't know what that is, it's okay, like most people don't, but my father was in the title insurance business for his whole career, and he had gotten my husband a job in title insurance, and so we just kind of put it, there are a lot of reasons why it was a really temp there were why a temp agency for title insurance employees was a good idea. We're in Southern California, and there was a lot of volatility. They would traditionally lay off every twice a month, so there were a lot of reasons. So it was my dad's idea. We were at pizza one night, and he goes, "Why don't you start a temp agency for title insurance people?" We're like, "Oh, that sounds like it's actually a really good idea."
That's a nice little niche, right? It's almost like that might be a recurring theme here. But yeah, it's kind of so you have that. How'd the first year go?
Yeah, I mean, first it started just like we started business planning and stuff like that. So we did some groundwork, but really, I mean, we bought a book that was, those dummies books, like the yellow
Yeah.
and black. So there was actually a book that we bought that was How to Start a Temp Agency for Dummies. And I've searched to try to find that book. I have not found it, but that's basically what you and I do, right? Like we teach people how to start
Yeah.
temp agencies. So
That would be a
uh,
great new LinkedIn headline, by the way. So yeah, that's
yeah,
open.
right.
Yeah,
There you
yeah.
go. There you go. And yeah, so then we just started planning, and then put an ad. Back then it was an ad in the LA Times, 3-line ad for a title
Wow.
assistant for like one of the roles. And then first we got a resume. And I mean, back then it was PO box, and I would go at work. I'd go to my lunch break and check the PO box. The day that I got the first resume, I literally cried. I could not believe that someone sent me a resume. I thought that was so amazing that I got a candidate, and then the next day, I quit my job. So then just started like
One
literally.
candidate. You got this. You're down. Like you're in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was funny
I
because when
love
I
it.
quit, I gave my notice the next day, and they were like, the people I worked with, they're like, "That's such a risk." And I'm like looking around at this office with cubes, and I'm like, "No, this is the risk. Like staying here,
Yes.
that's the risk." So then, yeah, then we just like, I quit first and just started putting like one step in front of the other. Like literally knew nothing. I mean, did not know about, because we were an employer. Like we became, had all our temps were W-2 employees. So it was like, which is literally one step at a time. Like, oh, we got to figure out payroll. I mean, first we got a client almost right away because I checked that person's references.
Yeah.
And we also, rented a house like near where we thought our clients were going to be. And it turned out they
Yeah.
were an hour away, our first client. So it was all, but really the point is, like you said, showing people that it's possible. I mean, it was literally like every one step at like, what do we have to do next? What do we have to do next? And just kept on executing.
I love it. I mean, we teach all the time in digital recruiter. I got to imagine we're going to get into your program as well that you're doing the same thing, but it's just, you got to put in the work. Like, and it's not sexy. It's just like that stuff. Like you figure out one problem at a time and you build and you build. But if you have the mindset for things to build off each other, right? I mean, I know I got to imagine that's what you did. Like but you just start, right? I've said it time and time again on this podcast.
Mhm.
If you expect automation to do all the work for you, if you expect content to do all the work for you, you're in for a rude awakening and a disappointment, right? This is the job at the end of the day. You got to get this stuff down,
Yeah.
and then all the other stuff becomes fun to add on, and it's really cool to have now in 2024 versus late 90s, right? To have some of this opportunity. Also, this comes with more competition too. But
Mhm.
it, this is it. It's the grind, right? For me, it was like trying to figure out what forklift drivers did and the different types of forklifts. And, the margins weren't that great. The pay rate wasn't that great. But that's just how I learned the job.
Yeah.
Right. And you can always do that, you can always attack different niches and industries or whatever, but you can't shortcut the reps and just the hands on, getting kind of kicked in the teeth a little bit over and over and over again. You're like, man, I thought I just had this down. And then a whole other problem comes up. So it's just inspiring when I hear that, because it just is always a constant reminder that there's no shortcut for just the grind of this. But
Yeah.
when it's your own business, it's way different, right? It feels way different.
Yeah. And there's a kind of a myth right now because people, and I've done a lot of different executive coaching, not just recruiting founders. And I mean, there's like this myth that is being sold to people that you can just start a business and not really work. But it's like it doesn't work that way.
It is crazy. I tried that in 2018. I
Yeah.
was broke in 2019. It did not work out very well for me.
Yeah.
And I, licked my wounds and went back to the drawing board. I
Mhm.
was like, what do I
Mhm.
actually want to do and work on? And then I got to the right direction and what I do. So it's like, all right, I've admitted that I want to work consistently. It's just finding things that are worth your while. That is a challenge. Don't get me wrong, but it's like that should be the drive, because it gets kind of, I mean, the 4 hour work week or whatever, I just get bored. I mean, there's only so much you know, stuff that you do. You want to go solve problems, right? I think that's what's more interesting.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, and I think it
I'm
probably
with you.
took Tim Ferriss a lot of work to get to that, to
To
arrive to
four
that
hour
point,
weeks.
to
Yeah,
accomplish
and he's
that
still doing stuff. He's still everywhere doing things, right? So it's like he's not even following his own advice.
point.
So it's it's simply how it works. But so you build up the firm. When did you? I mean, well, you got your first resume. You're like, I made it. But how long did it take to become where you felt like you were established?
It didn't take that long.
Yeah.
Within the first few months, we were making a profit.
Yeah.
It really didn't take that long. We did the whole, from start to exit was 6 years. So we did our first million within the first year. So it did not take that long.
Gotcha. And this is all contract to hire, right? Pay rates, bill rates,
Yeah.
all that good stuff. Was there any direct hire? Yeah,
Not very minimal, but
very
not
minimal.
really. I have done direct hire, more recently, but it was very, very few direct hire. Some
Hmm.
contract to hire. Well, actually, most were contract to hire. Turned
Yeah,
out to be, a lot of times that bring someone in as a contractor, but then they turn out to be contract to hire. But it was mostly contractor temp to hire.
gotcha. And
Mhm.
so you built up. What was? I want to get to definitely exit and all that, but I'm actually curious now that we're talking about this more. What was business development like then
It
for
was,
you?
that's a good
Yeah,
question. It's so funny. It's like to think about things before.
uh,
I mean, in
yeah,
by the way, every technology I was there for, Monster, we were at the beta testers. We were beta testers for Indeed, when everything
yeah,
was free and the founders were begging us to try it. So but yeah, so that it's kind of, even LinkedIn, people were so freaked out about their employees being on LinkedIn. That means they're looking for a job. We're not going to allow them to be on LinkedIn. But and
yeah.
biz dev was, okay, here's something that is the same in biz dev that people usually overlook is the connecting people and connecting the dots. That is still the same, but because of automations, and don't get me wrong, I do automations, I like cold sequences and things like that, but because all that's available and all of the content about it, people forget that we're in the people business and we're talking to people every day and connecting the dots of those people. So my first client became a giant client was from um, calling references from that first resume. And we got a client straight away from that. And, we called and we're just like, we were, before we changed our name, we were called Title Temps. So I was like, hey, this is Diane Prince from Title Temps. And they'd be like, what is Title Temps? And I'd be like, oh, like, what, you don't know? And then
we're going to be all over Google. No.
where have you been? Like the weekend. But literally that's how it happened. And then just, so references, and I mean, up to this date, I get clients from references. So just really, it was a lot of connecting the dots, and we did trade shows and things too, but it was mostly, and also from our temps, like our contractors. And because sometimes people will say, well, I just talked to this agency last week, and they're like, well, we can't, like, our contractors don't have any connections. They're $15 an hour employees. I'm like, ours were like $7 an hour employees. Like, it doesn't, like, we got business from being curious, like with our building relationships. And especially when you're in a tight niche, like we were, you can make relationships and you get so much information from just being curious about, talking to your contractors.
You click something there for me that I've talked about forever, and I know you have as well, is the connecting the dots is like, that's the explanation, right? You get curious to then connect the dots. That's our job. Like, that's what this is, right? Like, it's really as simple as that. So if you're not curious or you're not looking to connect dots, it's really not going to work out for you. Right. And you got to look into kind of why that is. Well, have you been fed business? You come from a big corporation. You don't have to really like think through things as much, situation, but like, that's how you make stuff happen. And I love that you said that, because that never has changed. Those are the principles of what this is, right? People, matchmaking, what makes sense. And everything you're saying is always what's in it for them, right? The references, right? It shows quality, right? All that stuff, an experience that they haven't had maybe before from another agency. And even the referrals, people like that. If they are doing a good job and they have a good job, they get excited about it. So capitalizing on all that work you did to create that, it's also really smart. So like, you're also just leveraging all the work that you're doing, right? Versus having to start from zero every single time.
Right. Everybody's a warm lead. Anyone you've ever interviewed for a job, anyone you like, I mean, I guarantee you, if anyone listening to this has had a business for any length of time, or been in recruiting, or like been in a job, or a human on this planet, like you have warm leads. And if I guarantee you, if you contact, like, you even spend 20 minutes, even 15 minutes a day, just texting people or whatever, hey, how is it going? How's your job? You are going to get business if you are, and it's all about consistency.
Consistency, right? We talk about the approach, the system, and consistency. That's what equals results and great clients. Like, but you have to have all three. I love it. All right, let's get into the exit. Right? What was that process? I mean, you planned for it from the start. What was that process? Or I guess maybe we could talk about, what do you have to have in place first, right? How should you kind of think about it, and then we can kind of go into what that actually was like for you and how it played out.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the most important thing is to build a business, to build a real business and a profitable business, and just a solid foundation. Because even if you don't exit, you're going to have a business. And also some people decide not to exit. I mean, there were people that started at the same time as I did, and they're billionaires now because they're still going, So it's really a decision of what you want to do. That wouldn't have been the track for me. I mean, it'd be nice to be a billionaire, honestly, but I'm not, I'm more of like a builder and seller and get out and do something else. But anyway, so things in place. One is, your numbers, they have to be clean. You have to have solid accounting. You have to have things intact, right? Like, get really clear. And it's so common with entrepreneurs to be vague with numbers and not really have like a clear idea. And if that's anyone listening or whatever, you're not alone. That is just so common. So even if you're listening to this and you're like, whoa, like, I have no idea, just very common. You can even just start by just knowing, just getting some clarity around that, but also then having a finance person and having your books in order. So that's one thing, is accounting, your numbers, team, like there came a point where, because we would talk to advisors and say, okay, here's where we're at now. What's the next step? And so we knew that we didn't want to stay with the business. Like we wanted to sell it and leave. And so we had to put an executive team in place that wanted to stay. So that's the other thing is team and recurring revenue. And that's why I help, one of the things I do is help people who have direct hire businesses productize and turn their business model into recurring revenue. You might still do contingency, but to add a recurring revenue model because that's what people want to see. Because otherwise, if they buy the business and everything goes away, it's not attractive.
And that's where we've been doing that. Like Lauren, my business partner, like she's did a lot with like retained and like kind of monthly retained and all that. So we do that for clients as well. We've just brought on another client that we're doing some exclusive contingent work for them, but they want to start payrolling, the people that they bring on, that they hire, payroll them through us because they hire consultants and everything. So we're kind of starting that piece of it as well. And it is just kind of diversifying and not to tackle it all at once, but you can layer these things on, right, bit by bit. So
yeah, and you also want to have, to your point, you want to have an anchor client strategy. So you want to have a diversified client base. I was just talking to someone today, actually two different founders who said their revenue was 75% one client. So you really have to have, like we had my niche. So we expanded into mortgage. Our biggest, this is another company, our biggest client was Countrywide Home Loans. Their CEO was literally, if you Google him, he is the poster child of the 2008 financial crisis. He was our biggest client. Countrywide went bankrupt. Then B of A took them over. We lost all that business, but still stayed in business because we had a diversified client portfolio.
how did you manage? This is a question that comes up a lot. How do I get more clients while I'm working on the roles with current clients? Like, how do you balance that or is there even a balance there? But like, how do you go about that process? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Like when you're in the weeds and trying to help.
Yeah, it comes up all the time, and you just kind of sparked that. And I was like, it'd be good to get your take on it because this is a big issue I hear over and over again, right? Well, I got these recs to fill. I can't go do business development, right? And now we can do a lot of fun stuff with automation and content, but a little bit different there. I mean, how would you handle it kind of, at that stage, kind of in that era?
Yeah, well, you've always got to build pipeline. You've always got to, and it's so common to stop building pipeline because either you're overwhelmed with the work that you're doing because you're in the weeds, or because you're so confident that you have business that you're not building pipeline. But that is the most important thing. So it goes back to what you said at the beginning about working. Like at the beginning, if it's just you or you and a partner or whatever, you have to work your ass off. Like we would, like back then, like we literally had manila folders with our candidate, like that was our ATS, and with our candidates, and we were like, we'd have like on one side, okay, these are the orders we have, and then we're like, these are the candidates we have, and we're now figuring out how to put them in those slots. And so one thing that I would recommend that recruiters do is also take more authority and more of a consultative role with your clients, because people get sort of like a little bit like, I don't know, like not confident when presenting candidates. So be consultative and have conversations about your candidates. So you're not so like you want to have a better chance of filling the roles, right? If we're talking about contingency or staffing too, but and then so at the and when you're at that stage, because I'm guessing if people are asking that, they're early on, right? They're like one or two people. So look at
You'd be
no.
surprised. You'd be surprised. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then it could be a management issue. It could be a leadership and management issue, because that's something I help people with too, is like, how do you lead your team? How do you delegate? I mean, that's likely.
Yeah, it's because it's interesting, right? I mean, there's a traditional way, which is obviously this industry was built off of that, right? The in-person ATS, or the Manila ATS system, right? That's great. But just even kind of the thought part, like, yeah, there are one big clients, and that's the people that join, digital recruiter, it's like when they have that, they know like it's great now, but I gotta join this. I gotta put in the work, the approach to kind of get ahead of this. And then some that join and some that don't get ahead. It's like, oh, maybe I can kind of just wait it out another 6 months. I'm like, you just can't. Like, you gotta be on it really yesterday, right? Like, when you ever ask a hiring manager what the start date is, they always say yesterday. It's the same thing with prospecting and recruiting, right? You got to be on it yesterday if you're not on it today.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's huge. So you had the folders. Were you going out like just walking in? I mean, Ramit Airtech and the LA, I was kind of near your hood. Like, I was just walking in with my best references, my best candidates. I love what you said about knowing the candidates and understanding them. They would
Mhm.
always teach us to have a 5 minute G2 is what they called a candidate screen. But I was on the phone for like 20, 30 minutes when I was starting out because I wanted to know everything about the candidate. I had to learn the industry, the skill set. And that's also why I hit like 10K in spread faster than any other recruiter in the office, because
Mhm.
I spent five times the 30 minutes versus five versus what they told me, but it worked out because I knew my candidate. I knew how to present them, knew how to sell them to the
Yes.
manager, and eventually the client. So then you were just doing that to like walking into people. Was it like into factories, like the offices, or like how'd that go?
Oh, like for biz dev, or is that what you
Yeah, for
mean?
biz dev. Like, once you talk to the candidate, you get to know them. Like, is it just walking in the door? Is it cold call? Was it, yeah, like looking
It
at
was
ads? Yeah.
it was more like, as far, well, candidates, they would come to the office, which was our house at first, and then we did, our first office was actually in the title insurance plant. So we were in the office where all the title insurance companies were. So that
Okay.
was pretty epic. We were the, like, no one else had no other vendor or supplier had an office there. So just thinking about different ways that you can do business, like no one was doing that. So we actually had, people could come by and pick up their paychecks, and it was, we were right there. But yeah, a lot of phone calls. But even like up, like, current, I mean, more current, I was at a tech recruitment agency, and that really made, I wanted to get back in and get, like, like newer experience and see what that was like. So I was at a tech recruitment firm in LA, and they hired me to help them build out their contracting division. And we had, I mean, up until like 2020, and we interviewed people came to the office, and we also gave, that was one of our KPIs for the recruiters, is you got, like, that was one of the things for you.
IOIs, in-house interviews. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
makes such a difference. And it makes me kind of think of people that started recruiting that didn't really have that or don't have that experience, right? Working in the pit with other recruiters, meeting candidates in person. Like, there is a dynamic that's missed when you don't have that.
Yeah.
That really adds a lot of depth to like recruiting and what it is. And it is interesting. Like, I realized that at the end of 2022, really about a year ago. I was like, I'm teaching digital stuff to people that only know digital, but I have the whole experience and background of doing this, feet on the ground, boots on the ground, talking to candidates. I'm like, I've actually had to share that perspective with so many people and start sharing that because they don't have context around that, and they kind of miss that piece. And I think you do miss a little bit of that getting curious, that digging, because it can be so impersonal if you don't watch out with Zoom calls and like everything else, like versus that in person or having lunch with someone or having coffee. So it's an interesting dynamic. And do you see that too, kind of in your coaching business with the recruiters that you work with? And that's something that you have to like identify and address. And if
Yeah, I mean, it's
yeah,
different now because it is like, things are remote, everything's, kind of,
yeah,
things aren't really local as much. So, I mean, I do think that you can build that relationship on Zoom. It's not quite the same, but it is getting to know your candidate. And I wanted to just, when you said about the people, like, you're so busy filling the racks and everything, one thing I did want to say about that was, in those stages, like where you're overwhelmed, and you look at things like creating SOPs. So, like, and if you look at it like, okay, this is the state right now, we're overwhelmed. Like, right now we have so many recs to work on, we can't do biz dev. Okay, so I would always look at that as, okay, as I'm doing, like, look at this as, okay, this, I've identified this is going to be a temporary state. We know we have to get it all done. This is temporary. And at the same time, okay, I'm doing all of this. I might be working 12 hours or 15 hours or whatever. It's temporary. And I'm going to be, at the same time, I'm creating SOPs. So I'm always looking at things like, okay, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, how am I going to train other people? Like, how am I going to create this SOP so that I can scale and train other people to do this?
Absolutely. So you kind of hit that limit because there's going to be long 70, 80-hour work weeks in recruiting. And I'm sure you had weeks that was more, right? Especially if you're doing payroll, collecting time cards, and all this other stuff, right? Uh, so always thinking when you kind of hit that breaking point, getting it on paper, SOP, and being able to delegate it. That's stuff is something I have to work through all the time now. I'm not I do a lot more messaging form than necessarily maybe organized SOP. Although AI can kind of help with that now, which is good. So you can document it in the moment while it's busy, and just knowing that sometimes there are going to be those weeks and months where you just are working overtime. But it's like to work overtime to then have things kind of smooth out, right? Like you always have that vision of like, all right, this is a phase, like this is a sprint. And I mean, like for
Yeah.
me, there's a lot of sprints in recruiting. Like it's kind of is always a sprint. Like if you look at it that way versus this long haul, I think I found that to kind of be easier. I don't know about you, but that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
how it helps my mindset.
Yeah, yeah, and you can also use ChatGPT for stuff like that. Like this,
Yeah,
as I said, like this is what I'm doing. Like this is my business. This is what I'm doing. I need you to create an SOP for an employee manual to train my employees how to do this, and then you edit it.
yeah,
That is
that's
pretty
it.
mind blowing.
What was the process of going through an exit like?
It was so I've exited in many different ways.
Yeah,
Um, so from like going through a whole process with an investment banker, that was a $28 million exit. I did $1 million exit with just like literally picking up the phone and calling people. It was one thing that I was told by one of our advisors is that the deal will probably fall through 5 times before it closes, and that happened. We actually did have one deal that fell through and during 9/11, like literally their team from New York from the trade centers was in LA doing diligence when the trade towers fell. So that was the first deal that we had that was a solid deal that fell through. And then after
well,
that happened, we decided that we were going to just hunker down and buy businesses. And then turned out, well, our first call, they were like, well, we have someone who might want to buy you. So it was it was a lot of work because it was complicated and we sold to a public company. So that deal was very complicated. I basically like kind of took the forefront and managed it with lawyers and accountants and stuff. But, yeah, but then it was when it happened, that was pretty awesome. Like when the money
yeah,
hit the wire hit our bank
yeah,
account,
yeah.
that was insane. Yeah.
So what'd you do when that happened? What was the next few months like?
The next few months after the deal closed.
Yeah, you just like chill on a beach somewhere. Did you get right back to work? Like
No, we
what's
didn't
yeah,
work because we had non-competes and stuff. So
yeah.
no, we didn't work for 3 years until the non-competes expired and stayed home. I actually I this we had a party, so that there was a limo waiting for us to go to the party, and I had I had 2 little kids then, and I did a pregnancy test. I don't know why I did it that like while literally the limo was waiting and realized I was pregnant. So
So at least you didn't get drunk. Yeah.
so I didn't get thrown at
Yeah.
least, or like I don't know. Either
Yeah.
way, like, it wasn't the
Yeah.
night, but yeah, we had some parties. Like we also had so that party was with our team, like our close team,
Yeah.
lawyers or whatever, and families. And then we had a big party with friends in Vegas, and and we had little kids, so it was
It was
yeah.
tamed down a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
But having done that honestly, and then it was pretty awesome because and then like it was funny because like all the other parents at school would be like they're so busy and whatever. I'm like I was like I don't know why y'all are so busy because after like after selling a business and then just like being home with I'd be like I'd pick up the kids and be like I don't know, like I read a novel today. I went surfing and worked out and I read a novel. Like I don't know what you guys are doing or why you're so busy because I was like nothing is as busy as building a business, right? So
Yeah.
what y'all like what your issue is.
A little bit of a skewed perspective, right?
Right.
It's like that's a really interesting, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. So it's kind of cool. It seemed like you got to be able to. I mean, you got 3 years to really spend time with like family and kids and kind
And
of
I
all
mean,
that stuff and slow
we did
down.
have
Yeah,
days. Like I'm not saying you're not busy if you're a stay-at-home mom because you certainly
yeah,
are, but We had nannies and housekeepers, so it
Yeah,
was
but
like
yeah.
so that after the school
That's an
happened.
honest admission. Yeah, that's an honest admission. But even that, it's still it's still it get a little chaotic. So I grew up in that type of household too. But um, that's really cool. I mean, really cool. A lot of work. You gave the 3 steps. You gave the like it's gonna fall through a bunch of times. How did you vet the right people to work with, like on the accounts, lawyers, investment? I mean, we have to go in on all that stuff, but I got to imagine right, there's a whole process there. Like how'd you even go about it? Did you even know what you're? I mean, was there like some strategy behind that as well?
Yeah, I mean, we still when we first started, we had one lawyer that was like a guy my dad knew, and then we switched to a different lawyer, and so I don't know, like were they exactly the right people? I don't know. We had our investment banker was killer though, like he was really well known in LA, and he was a shark, like he was really good, and he really helped us to get. This is once you go to exit, it's funny because when you first start out, you're watching every penny. And then when you're exiting, you want the deal to happen so badly. You're like literally like walking away from like, you're like, just do it, just sign it.
Yeah, because you don't want to mess up the numbers or anything else.
Right.
Like, yeah, yeah,
It'll be like, no, like that's a different, that's an extra $300,000. And we're like, no, just do it. So
yeah,
like having him to be really like, that was a really learning experience, like
yeah.
huge. Because, I think he protected a lot of it because we were just so wanting it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could build like a whole other LLC to like get that business in, but like don't mess with this one, and all that. But no, I know you can't quite do that. But
Yeah.
okay, that's cool. Really cool process. Cool story, kind of showing that it's possible. Let's get into because a lot of stuff I want to talk about some of the coaching stuff that you're doing, the productized stuff. We could talk about your first employee, hiring your first employee. We could talk about productized services. What direction are you thinking of going here?
Yeah, well, so what I help people with, we can talk about like both really briefly. So,
Yeah.
hiring, well, I'll just say like one just little plug for or little tip for hiring is so many people look for people with experience. I I did not take that approach. My first employee was a 17-year-old student at Pasadena City College, and now she's head of APAC at Meta. So I hired for good people, right? Like personality and being driven, being
Drive.
motivated. Um, and there's a lot of, sorry to say it, but there's a lot of not great recruiters out there. And there's a lot of people who are trained by not great managers. And I see that common mistake is hiring people because you think you need people with experience. And so I think with a startup, there's two roles that are the most important. One is that first person that's like the catch-all, and that's what that person was to us. Like, you can do anything, is willing to do anything, admin, sales, whatever you need. And then like now, online business manager, integrator, someone who's, if you're have virtual assistant, someone who's managing, like I have a virtual assistant now, or she's more of an integrator. She does all my recruiting for my VAs and things like that, make sure everything runs smoothly. That I think is the most important part. That's the most important role. And then as you move on and as you're growing, you need someone on a higher level that person might move into that role, but you need an operator, you need a high level like COO integrator. If you're a visionary entrepreneurial, with most founders are. And then as far as productizing, what so if you whether you want to exit or not, it's really like that's the next level, right? So you can, and it all goes back to vision, right? Like, so if you want to be a freelance recruiter, you don't want to deal with employees. I totally get that. Like, there's, no shame in that at all. Then a contingency, one person, two person, five-person shop might be the way to go. That might be what you want to do, because productizing does get more complicated, and you have employees, and but if you want to get past that feast or famine mode, and you really want a business that's going to scale without having to stress out if a direct hire is going to stick, then you really do want to productize your business. Right now, the main things, like people that I work with, we mainly do, about half of my clients are doing RPO, recruitment process outsourcing, and different there's so many different options and how to handle RPO, how to do that, but people are doing really well with that. And then staffing, and there's pluses and minuses to both of those. I mean, staffing's a little bit more complicated, but you can really get a toehold. If you have thousands of employees on temporary assignments or contracts, then businesses cannot operate without your employees.
Right. And then that's where the multiplier, right? Because I don't think a lot of people listening know, like the direct hire business, there's almost no multiplier, right? But with a staffing and the contract, that's where there is a multiplier. I don't know if you want to kind of give a little bit of a one-on-one there for people listening that just might not be aware of the differences or be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, because it was interesting. Because when I was at HireCloud, and I noticed that was my first real experience with a direct hire agency, and it was interesting because as I was teaching people how to do staffing, they were kind of worried and didn't really know how to sell it. But it is pretty similar. All you have to do is understand the numbers, right? Like you need to understand and it's not that complicated. So it's usually if they're W-2 employees, you just have to know what your burden, and not to get too complicated, but it's usually 18% is what you're going to pay if they're your W-2 employees. You can also sometimes people do corp to corp, where the contractors have corporations. Again, not to get too detailed. If anyone wants to know, I'm happy to share your LinkedIn post. And if you want to connect,
you're bringing me back to all my Aerotech days, so I love it. Yeah,
but just to keep it super. So I was working with this one recruiter asked me a couple of years ago. He said, "Can you help me to get some biz dev?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do. I'll take the challenge." And so he had no website, only 1-star Google reviews, but the guy's a really good recruiter, but just had done some weird stuff, but was up and up, whatever. So I'm like, okay, I'm up for this challenge. And so, I mean, I got him a contract that it's still actually, still it's $40K a month. And it's, that's with 2 contractors, by the way, 2 contractors billing $40K a month. So
what's the take home typically? So you got the burden and all that.
Yeah.
Some people get confused by that, right? Direct hire, they see a check and that's it, right? You figure out tax and all that, but you got the bill rate, you got the pay rate. So you bill $40K a month. What are you typically looking at? Ideally with margin, I know it depends on the skill set. If you're in office, everything else. Yeah.
With those roles, I would just do some calculations. So with those roles, they're bringing besides sales commission, they're bringing in about $25 an hour for those roles. So if you multiply that by 2,000,
280, yeah.
So that's $50K. So that's kind of the same as a $50K placement fee.
Yep.
But it's consistent, and then you stack it. And so a lot of times, I got one contract that was at HireCloud, and it ended up being $2 million in billing. But then the contract extended. Sometimes they're 2-year contracts; they go to 5-year contracts. So it just, and then you just keep on stacking and stacking and stacking the contractors, and you don't have you never have a goose egg month, and then you build on, you need to build on more than one client and clients, but it's, you just have that continuous revenue coming in every month, and you don't need that. People say our average employee was a $15 an hour employee. We had 700 people out. So that's $50 million.
So a lot of direct hire people don't even know how to go about contract. And as you said, it's for a lot of times it's just, for me, was they didn't even know if it was an option, right? Sometimes people are used to hiring managers are used to contract. They don't know that you can do direct hire. And some people are only used to direct hire. They don't even know you can do contract. Is there a way that you identify companies, people that you kind of figure are going to have some contract business or would be good targets for that? Because I don't think our audience is super clear on that piece.
Yeah, it's when you're looking for contract, people ask me that a lot. How do you know the difference? Is there a difference in biz dev? And the answer is yes and no. With the small to medium sized businesses or medium, those are generally the clients I like to work with, because the giant clients are all in MSPs. They're very low margin, unless you have, to do a whole other, we had one division that only serviced MSP and then sold that to a private equity firm. But so if you're looking at bigger clients, like brand name enterprise clients, those are usually the ones I want to avoid because they're super low margin. They're working with like Manpower and Kelly, and they have like, you're not making much money on those. You want to go to, I do, like, I'd rather go to medium sized businesses. Sometimes you don't know if they have contractors or not, but usually, like, if you're looking, you look through the candidates and you can see, like, you can just do a Google search or search on LinkedIn and see who's working contract roles. There's a lot of people who are contract, and then you find out, like, you can call them, and and you just kind of, again, like, connect the dots.
Yep, discovery, get curious, all that stuff. Yeah,
But
that's
also, anytime that any direct hire agency, if you're talking to because that's often the same person who's in charge of hiring contractors too. And if you just say, "Hey, do you need any contractors?" See what they say, and then call me. I'll tell you how to do it. But you just
Yeah,
say, "Did you get? Can I help you with contractors too?" See what they say.
I love it. It's just a great playbook, and I mean, people need to hear it. We haven't really covered here, and that's what I was trained to do. Was exactly what you just said. So I learned a direct hire piece really a lot more after, and so it's always interesting. On my, it's just like, I don't know, you just kind of do it, like, and it's a helpful breakdown. I know we're gonna have to kind of wrap up here in a few minutes, but I want to cover really two pieces if we can get to it. But first, something that you and I talked about when you're first starting out, if you lack experience, if you're maybe new to your offering or to your niche, right? How do you handle a sales call?
Yeah. Don't talk about yourself or what you do, because some people will be like, "Oh, this is, this is how I'm going to be the best. I'm going to get you the fastest candidates." Instead, get into their pain points, understand what they're being measured when you're talking to either a hiring manager or someone from talent acquisition. Find out, get to know them, and get to know what is success to them and their roles. Like, what are they being measured on? Okay.
Yeah.
Because you want that, everybody wants to look good. Everybody wants to look good to their managers. So you want to ask questions like that. And then if you're talking about a role or something, to find out, like, get really deep into like what will help to solve their problem. You can even say, like, if you're presenting, with this kind of candidate, you can even find someone, a profile, and say, is this the type of candidate? And you kind of talk through. Also, bonus points to look at the not required in the JD. Like, most recruiters start with looking at the requirements and not the nice to haves. But if
Yeah.
you start with the nice to haves, that really, they have that too. They kind of assume you have the other ones. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
Test the
focus
job
on,
description too. Yeah, absolutely.
yes, focus on how you're going to solve their problem. Let them talk about, like, kind of their pain points. And then, I mean, there's ways to structure the call, but really find out, like, what would be success for them. So make it about that instead of making it about you.
Uh, Absolutely. I feel like I've said that over and over and over again. I will continue to do so, and it's totally
Yes.
okay. And I know you do as well. We'll end with this, right? And you have the coaching company now recruiting, right? AT360. Why you could do a lot of things, a lot of things, had a ton of success with why coaching, right? And why now?
Well, I do have a teaching background, and it's so just something I've always wanted to do. And why now? Well, I became an empty nester. I
Yeah.
was a single mom for years. So after being a single mom for years, and I've been a volunteer coach and a mentor throughout my whole career. Like, I've helped with, all sorts of different things, like high schoolers and various things, like vocational kind of coaching and mentoring. So I've always loved that. And it's just a natural part of my career at this, like, where I'm at in life. And it's just something that, and what I love seeing, that the experience, because a lot of times, as you probably can relate, like, we take our own experiences and our own knowledge for granted. And
Yeah.
then when we're talking to people and they're like, "Oh, wow," and it's like a light bulb. And then we realize that we're able to really help people. That's exciting. And then also, like, I love building businesses, and I'm kind of obsessed with seeing if I can build a scalable coaching business, because I'm like,
Yeah.
that's my next challenge.
Yeah, I love it, and I just am so happy that we met, that we came across each other, LinkedIn, and that we've talked. I mean, this was action packed, a wealth of knowledge in the podcast. Topics we really haven't covered before on this podcast, and I'm going to have to listen to it again. I'm excited to kind of keep talking to you, hopefully finding ways to collaborate. I know there's a ton of value you can add to the recruiter community. I got my work to do to figure out what I can do to help you guys out. But I feel like we're just gonna keep learning from you. So I appreciate you coming on here, sharing all the tips and experience and the fun stories. You have awesome journeys. So we'll get the LinkedIn, the URL, the website, all that stuff on the episode page. So make sure to connect with Diane. Anything we want to leave the listeners with, Diane?
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I would just say, like, since I was so glad meeting you, and there's so many other amazing coaches in this space. And it's just been fun. Like, it's been so fun getting to know you. And yeah. So anybody who's inspired, there's,
Reach out.
call me, call Clark, and we'll tell you who to talk to, because
I
we'll
always
talk.
yeah. I always say go to who you feel like you're going to actually learn from and implement. That's when it's just like who do you like? That's who you go invest, right? That's why I don't mind talking, as I can learn from different people, and that's how listeners are here, right? So it's like this is just giving an opportunity. Like, all right, out there, help is out there. Now it's just like who can help, right? And there's different stages of helping too. So
Yeah.
there's ways to work with everyone too. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, that'll do it. We'll let you go. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time.